Welcome to episode 8 of Coffee and Co-Read, your source for all things literary, with Catherine
and Kristen, where we believe there is nothing better than a hot coffee and an awesome book. Join us for a virtual book club where we take one book a month and dive into all the drama, adventure, and romance we can find.
Hey, Kristen.
Hi, Catherine.
So, because of all the sexual tension in the last 2 books that we've been reading, obviously last week was a big one, we really thought that it'd be fun to talk about book boyfriends today. So, Kristen, who are your favorite book boys?
So I will say that I think Ron Weasley from Harry Potter is probably my OG book boyfriend, but I sort of tend to fall in love with whoever I'm reading about at the time.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of authors make really awesome characters that you fall in love with, so it's really easy to collect book boyfriends, we'll say.
Gotta catch them all.
I've always had a thing for comic book Thor, not Chris Hemsworth Thor, although I do like him too. But comic book Thor, I've always had a thing for, and also the Bat Boys from A Court of Thorns and Roses. So like Reese, Cassian, and Azriel. I know that Reese is sort of problematic to some people, but I can't help it. And also Jace from City of Bones. At one point, I wanted to get a tattoo dedicated to him. Like when I was a teenager, I was dead set.
He was like your book husband, not just boyfriend.
He was. And you probably remember me being obsessed with him.
Yeah, I remember one of the books, there's a miscommunication trope, maybe we'll call it. And I remember you telling me about it before I had even like heard of these books. And I'm like, I don't even know what she's talking about anymore. But you were so mad. And you were like, in the next book, I'm going to look it up before I even finish reading it.
Yeah, I was really upset about it.
Well, that's how you know it's a good character.
Yeah. Who are your book boyfriends?
I definitely have to say that Darcy from Pride and Prejudice is like my OG number one. He is the love of my life.
I know. Why can't we all have a Darcy?
Right? And I love the Matthew McFadden version from the 2005 Pride and Prejudice film.
But you also really liked Pride and Prejudice and Zombies as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah, not the Darcy was okay in that movie. It was mostly the Elizabeth in that movie. She's just a badass. So I loved her. Yeah. My first probably real book boyfriend was also Harry Potter because that was one of the first series I ever got into. But it was actually Sirius Black, the book version. Gary Oldman wasn't exactly what I pictured. He was a bit older, but he was still obviously amazing. But I loved Sirius Black, a tortured man that I was like, I could fix him and make his life so much better. You know, like we all do when we're children.
So it's just funny to me that we both pick Harry Potter boys, but I pick like the awkward teenager. You pick the grown-up man
who's been in jail. Like, yeah. Yeah. Then Lord of the Rings was probably my next love, and it was obviously Strider, Aragorn, and I did see the movies first, and I gotta say Viggo Mortensen was probably half the reason that I fell in love with him. And also the dark hair and the broodiness and that whole get up was obviously my jam.
He was always sweaty.
It's true. Yeah. Well,
you have a type.
I do. Yep. That hockey hair, you know. Oh my. And then, yeah, like you said, whatever I'm reading about, I kind of fall for someone in it. So I Dimitri from Vampire Academy and Rowan from Throne of Glass and Will Herondale from the Infernal Devices trilogy all have a special spot in my heart.
Yeah. I got to agree with you there. Like all of them, I would not. I guess what's the saying? I wouldn't kick any of them out of bed.
For eating crackers.
Yeah.
That's fair, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're on part 4 of 5 of House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. We're really getting through it.
Yeah. So this week we are talking in chapters 52 to 70. And just a heads up, we are not a spoiler free zone and things could get a little saucy.
As you should know if you listened to last week's episode.
Yeah. Last week got very saucy.
Yeah,
Innuendos all over the place.
exactly.
Um, so, if you need a refresher, last week we left off with um, Bryce finding out that um, there was this diagnostic test that they could have done on Danica's clothes at the time of her death. And it was the newer technology, and it belonged to the Fae. In other words, it belonged to the Autumn King, and he declined permission to use their technology. In other words, to run this diagnostic on Danica's clothes. So they were hoping it would have given them a lead to do this test, and the Autumn King turned them down. So that was, I guess, 2 years ago, book time. The current day, Bryce finds out about this, that the Autumn King refused permission to let them use the test. So she flips out and boots it and runs out of her apartment and just starts running towards the Five Roses district, which is where her father lives. That's where we left off last week. This week, we're picking up right where that left off. And it's sort of, I find, a little bit of it's a bit anticlimactic. So she goes there to tell off her father and sort of be like, you knew that Danica was like my closest friend, my closest person in the entire world, and you deliberately withheld a piece of technology that could have potentially led to a killer for her. And she's going to tell him off, and we want it so bad, her to finally confront her father, because they have not met yet at this point of the book. But when she gets to his villa, the guards don't let her in. So she doesn't get to have that confrontation. And I found that really like unsatisfactory, we'll say.
Yeah, kind of like all the sexual tension. Very similar.
Yes. Yeah. There's like a ton of build up and then it just goes away.
Fizzles.
Yeah. I guess Ruhn knows that she's going there, so he meets her and tells her that the Autumn King, her dad, did it to help Bryce and protect her. But like in my head, that's bullshit. Everything we've seen so far about the Autumn King, he doesn't give a shit about her. He has not made any attempt to recognize her as his child. He has not had a relationship with her. He hasn't done anything to make us think that he has a modicum of feeling for her at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think, I think Ruhn is sort of projecting maybe, like maybe that's what he would have done because he actually does care about her.
Yeah.
But I don't think the Autumn King cares at all.
No.
She gets pissed at Ruhn for trying to make excuses for the Autumn King and essentially tells him that he is never allowed to utter Danica's name again, which I also found a bit harsh. Like, I understand she's all in her feelings right now,
Mm-hmm.
and Ruhn is sort of there, and he's making excuses for douchebaggery. But it wasn't Ruhn's choice to withhold that info, like that test. So I feel like it wasn't his fault. She's just taking it out on him.
Yeah. Because it's easy to.
So she's so mad and she doesn't get the resolution she wants. So she goes to a whiskey bar and finally breaks her no drinking rule that she's had since Danica's death and starts like shooting whiskey. I guess Hunt shows up and he's trying to sort of trying to comfort her. However, it doesn't work. And she sort of is so used to pushing people away. And when she is hurt and angry, that's what she does. She pushes everyone away. So she sort of hits him where it hurts by essentially digging at his relationship with Shahar, who is his dead lover. So she
Which,
makes a dig at her. Obviously had this budding, like, it's not one of those relationships where they don't tell each other about their feelings,
hmm,
right? Like their feelings for each other are obvious, if that makes sense, to
hmm,
each other. Like they're mutually attracted to each other. They're sort of coming together. They know what they mean to each other.
yeah. They've been
So,
very they've been very open and like talking to each other about everything.
right. And the fact that Hunt has said, like, there's been no one else I haven't loved since her. I haven't, like, since Shahar. I haven't, been interested in anyone since Shahar. And then yeah, absolutely. Of course she's, feeling a little bit insecure. But
Especially now since she's like sad about something else. She's like, I'm going to be sad about everything that I feel
yeah,
because I want to
it's
feel miserable even more.
and it's what a lot of, not everybody, but a lot of people do that. They feel
Hmm.
sad about one thing, they start thinking about every other sad thing in their life. But he was trying to help, and
Yeah.
I don't think it was very nice that she sort of like she like hit where it really hurt with Shahar.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like Shahar to him is like Danica to her, in
Yeah.
my mind. So
Well, yeah,
eh,
we've got all the parallels throughout all of their talks
yeah,
between the two. So I think that's how we're supposed to see them. So,
yeah. So I don't think she would forgive him for bringing up Danica in a negative way. So I don't think it's fair that she brings up Shahar like that.
no.
Um, I guess he leaves the bar, and after he leaves, she sort of feels guilty then. And it's true, like you would, you say something shitty to your friend, you feel bad after. So she goes and gets groceries and brings them back to the apartment, and he's there, and she straight up apologizes, which I actually really enjoyed. That,
Hmm.
a lot of times they drag out this conflict and they like keep it quiet. You know what I mean? Like they pretend it didn't happen, and then later on it comes out like even more explosively, if that makes
Hmm.
sense. Like the
Yeah.
conflict gets bigger. But I like that she recognizes she was wrong almost immediately, and almost immediately apologizes.
Hmm.
So I think as two people who are developing a relationship, I think at this point they're really good with, for the most part, with communication.
Yeah.
She also then says that essentially she's been a mess since even before Danica died. So she's admitting that her sort of adult life has been a bit of a mess,
She's only
because,
like she was only 23. Everyone's a mess at 23. I know everybody that is 23 thinks that they're like the only person ever that's a mess. But everyone's a mess.
yeah, I don't know very many people that have their life together at 23. I'll just say it.
No.
Like, if anybody.
No.
But anyway, she felt like even before Danica died, she was a mess because she was only half Fae. So her status isn't, she's sort of looked down upon that way. Uh, and she has a lame degree. I think she's got like an art history degree or something like that.
Hmm.
And I guess she felt compared to her friends, she wasn't really going anywhere. So she had this circle of friends. Danica was the alpha of the pack, was eventually gonna be the alpha of like all the werewolves. She
Possibly all
was
the
like,
shifters, they say at one point.
yeah, she was super strong, super successful. Juniper had a lot of talent as a dancer. Like everyone sort of thought knew that she would be going places that way. And um, Fury is a mysterious. We don't really know what Fury does, but whatever it is, she's good at it because she's deals with all these higher ups and like going and traveling all the time. She's just super successful.
And
So
everyone's afraid of her.
yeah, everyone's afraid. So so she just felt like she wasn't going anywhere, and sort of like valid point. You know what I mean? Like she didn't have a long term plan for her life. Not saying she had to have one,
No.
but it's easy to feel, I guess, it's easy for her to compare herself to friends who are in the minority, but she just happened to be friends with three people that did have a plan,
Hmm.
even though they are like minority people, 23-year-olds. Like,
With a plan.
right?
With a plan at all. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Like,
Especially, they're all like, they all live such long lives.
I feel like, I just feel like her feelings are valid
Hmm.
of feeling inferior to her friends.
Hmm.
Um, Her and Hunt then sit down and have a little bit of a meaningful conversation. She finally tells him about the time her and Danica discovered an animal smuggling ring, and they decide they're going to break it up since none of the no one in the 33 or none of the arc like none of the angels or any of the soldiers would help. So they went to break it up themselves, and they almost died in the process. So that's sort of been our overarching. Every once in a while, she talks about the time that Danica told her she loved her, and the time that they're like overlooking a cliff of a picture, and they're beat up, but their arms are around each other. We keep getting snippets of this
Hmm.
scene, and now we finally know what it was. So they
Hmm.
went to break up an animal smuggling ring. I thought it was funny that the bad guys were like lizard men, like lizard shifters. So all I could think of were like snakes, like really big snakes slithering around on the ground and like trying to beat them up. I don't
Snakes trying to beat him up.
yeah. Yeah, that's literally what I thought of. I don't know why, but that was in my
Imagery.
brain. Yeah. Um, so I guess Bryce says that yes, her and Danica almost died, but that's who Danica was. She was someone that helped the less fortunate. So I think she's really trying to come to terms now with the idea that Danica stole the horn.
Hmm.
Because saying, how could Danica do that when that's not who she wasn't a thief. She was somebody who helped people less fortunate than herself and risked her own life for other people. So she
Hmm.
couldn't reconcile what she knew about Danica versus what she's learning about Danica now. Hunt uh, then sort of shares his own tidbit of information and says that he still agrees with the rebellion that he participated in. And he says that he thinks the archangel hierarchy is stupid. And in all fairness, we don't get a ton of information on what he means by the archangel hierarchy. Like, is he talking about the Asteri that rule the world? Is he talking about the archangels that, like Michael and Sandriel, that rule territory? Or like what sort of hierarchy is he referring to? Is he talking about the whole notion of their world of, like the Asteri on top, the archangels ruling, then the Fae and all the veneer like being elite, and then the humans being slaves. Like, is that what he's talking about? We
Hmm.
sort of don't get a whole lot of information on what exactly the rebellion was about, other than a rebellion
Yeah, we really don't. And like, obviously, there's another one going on now
with humans.
with humans, and they kind of have, so they at least compare the two, but like, it seems like they were different because there's a lot of angels now that are slaves, and obviously the fire sprites, yeah, they joined it as well. So it seems different than this one, but we really don't get a whole lot about the differences of the two.
Yeah. So they start talking a little bit about uh, Bryce making the drop. And she says, well, she doesn't really have an anchor because Danica was going to be her anchor and she was going to be Danica's anchor. And he's listing off people that she could use. Like, what about Ruhn? What about Juniper? But she says that she wouldn't feel right using other people. And this is a little bit of foreshadowing too. She says it doesn't feel right. And she sort of, it's one of my favorite explanations of their friendship given on this page. It's page 486, if anyone has the book. Um, she says, I know people don't get it. It's just a light went out inside me when it happened. Danica wasn't my sister or my lover, but she was the one person I could be myself around and never feel judged. The one person that I knew would always pick up the phone or call me back. She was the one person who made me feel brave because no matter what happened, no matter how bad or embarrassing or shitty it was, I knew I had her in my corner. That if it all went to hell, I could talk to her and it would be fine. And I just found that a really great explanation of their friendship because we're getting it all along in this book. We're getting how much Danica meant to Bryce just because of how she's acting, how she's not living anymore. She's just an empty shell. She almost committed suicide. Like, we're getting all that, but to have her vocalize and actually explain what it was about Danica, I just really appreciate it.
Hmm.
Um, and then she sort of says that she can't move on and do anything that gives her joy because her being happy reminds her of Danica. And she says she doesn't feel like she deserves to be happy, which is such a huge, like, obviously I know that a lot of people feel this way in their life, but I just find that so heartbreaking. Like, thinking that you don't deserve happiness in your life, I find it really upsetting.
I think it's like Sarah J. Maas does a great job of showing depression and grief in Bryce, and it really helps people understand if they read it and they haven't gone through it, but they know someone who's going through it. I think she does a great job with all of the feelings, really.
Yeah, like it's very believable.
Hmm.
So, it really does an awesome job of explaining the grief. And it makes you feel it too. Like, it's
Yeah.
good writing where you feel for her. You feel for a pretend person.
Well, we were just talking about how we were in love with pretend boys, so
Yeah.
it's okay to feel for
Yeah.
pretend friends.
Right. After all that sort of the confession, uh, she offers him the spare room of her apartment permanently. Like, even after their case is over, if he wants to move in, he can. And this is a huge step for her. Because if we remember at the beginning of the book, she said that there had been 3 people total in the apartment, her mom and stepdad and Juniper, and that is it. Nobody else has stepped foot inside her apartment. So for her to go from that to offering it up to him to be her roommate
Hmm.
is a huge step for her character, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Interesting little breadcrumb that we get next. I guess she goes to sleep at the end of the day, and the white cat appears in her room. So if you remember from last episode, um, the white cat is the one of the princes of hell, Adis, that she knows. She called on him and summoned him to ask him some questions. And he likes to appear in this dimension as a white cat sometimes. So he appears in her room and sort of while she's sleeping, sort of says to her, like, he sort of implies that she needs to make the drop because if the Autumn King knew about her, he would kill her. We don't know what it is, like, the Autumn King doesn't know about her. Like, we don't know what that is. So we don't know what Adis is talking about at this point, but she's sort of like half asleep and he's trying to talk to her while she's sleeping to sort of put it in her mind. Adis also says he wants to finish something with her after she does her drop. So again, it's just a little breadcrumb that we don't have solved yet.
Yeah. And doesn't get solved this book,
No,
unfortunately.
it does not. So this is another thing that I love about Sarah J. Maas is she's so good at breadcrumbing. I'm making it into a verb. She breadcrumbs. She sprinkles, like, not everything is solved in this one book. You know what I mean? It's not one of those types of trilogies where we sort of get a little bit of a tidy up and then the next book sort of continues on where we left off. But, like, you know, it's not one of those books. It's she's dropping you hints about stuff that might not get solved for another 2 books. But it's like
Yeah.
she's leaving you this trail and it's maddening, but in a good way.
Yeah, for sure.
You're like, what do you want, Adis? Anyway. But that's it for Adis. He says, he needs to finish something with her. Then he's off again. She never fully wakes up for that. She wakes up in the morning. She mentions that she needs coffee to survive. And I was just like, yes, you are my spirit animal. I also need coffee to survive. I will headache if I don't have it. We've obviously named our podcast after the fact that we both love coffee.
Yeah.
So I liked that little nod in there.
Same.
They finally get a hold of that Fae tech that was previously withheld. And they get some of Danica's clothes to test. They get it from Jezba's gallery. I guess Danica had some clothes stored there. And Bryce never bothered to move it.
Mm-hmm.
So they give it to Victoria. She's one of the Triari. She's a wraith. So I think we have encountered her before, but they give it to her to test. Micah then summons Hunt into his office. He's pissed because they haven't solved the case yet. And I find, like, we're getting more and more asshole Micah. So, like, he's being an asshole here, and it's been a definite shift in character. We've talked about it before, that at the beginning he was portrayed as somebody fair and just and kind, and now we're sort of getting, I guess he's sort of like devolving into maybe his true self, like he's letting his true self out a little bit more.
Yeah.
He's threatening to sell Hunt back to Sandriel. He's saying, if you don't solve this, like, you can forget about the deal. Maybe I'll sell you. Like, he's being a dick. He gives him another file, which is his sign of a person to kill. And obviously Hunt is gone all day because, again, Micah can dictate what sort of death to bestow on this person in the file. So he can tell him that he's allowed to use a gun, not allowed to use a gun, allowed to use knives, not allowed to use knives. And that sort of dictates how fast or slow this person is going to die. Like, is he going to be tortured all day, or is it just a quick, like, in and out sort of moment? Um, so I guess he's gone all day, which means he essentially tortured a person all day. Um, Bryce is home at her apartment and sort of like pacing back and forth, like wondering where he is. He's been gone for a super long time. Um, he won't answer his phone, so she's stressed. It's another sort of shift in her characters, like she's letting herself care about someone else. um she literally like stoops to calling her brother, and the last time she spoke to her brother was when she told him, like, you're not allowed to utter Danica's name. Like, it wasn't that long ago, like time wise, but they literally haven't spoken at all since that fight. And she calls him, and I found this funny, but like she calls him to ask if he had seen Hunt. I'm like, of course he hasn't,
Yeah.
but it just seems like she's looking for a connection. She's looking for someone to comfort her and for her
Mm-hmm.
to vent to, and just and let her worries out to. But she's too stubborn to say it. Um, he finally comes home, sort of when she's on the phone with Ruhn, like saying, "Oh, he's been gone all day. I don't know where he is." And then all of a sudden he walks in. She's like, "Okay, bye."
Yeah.
And
She like
hangs.
really basically hangs up on Ruhn.
Yeah,
Sorry for calling.
yeah. It's like super late at night, and he's like shell shocked. Like he just walks in. He doesn't say anything. He's like vacant, the same way she is a lot, and it's sort of like a nobody's home situation. And he just goes into the shower and turns it on to like a blistering hot and gets in. Um, we sort of get a little bit from his perspective at this point. He sort of realizes that she waited up for him because it was really late. And he says that he sort of saw the relief in her eyes when he was okay. And said that it sort of her caring about him and her feelings, her realization that he wasn't hurt, made him feel even worse about torturing and killing somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I will say props to Bryce because she figured out immediately what was going on. Like, she figured out, oh, he was on a job. He just killed somebody. Like, she figured it out like that.
Yeah.
Um, he was in the shower for 40 minutes before she checked on him. And I'm sorry, can your shower run
I
super
was
hot for
literally
40
just going to
minutes?
say that. That's exactly what I was thinking.
I would love to have a shower that ran hot for 40 minutes.
Right? It must be the magic, the first light or something. Like, has to be.
I'm so jealous.
Same.
Minus the fact that we're going to get into it. It's going to be a bit serious, but like, apart from the seriousness that's happening right now, I'm so jealous that he gets a 40-minute shower and the heat doesn't go away.
Yep. Same.
So I guess he was in there for a really long time. And she's like, well, geez, what's taking him so long? So she goes in and she saw him. He was like cowering at the bottom of the shower, like sitting in the shower, naked. And he
He
was
was naked
literally,
in the shower?
I know, I know. Isn't that wild? Uh, so he was on the floor of the shower, like curled up and like, almost like rocking back and forth. But he was letting the scalding hot water beat on his back and his shoulders and his arms, and he was blistering himself. He had the water on like boiling hot. So his skin would blister and burn, then heal because of his like advanced healing, and then it would blister and burn again. And he just let the water do that over and over and over and over again for 40 minutes at this point. And they have this really raw moment. She realizes that he does this after every single kill. He punishes himself by burning himself over and over and over again. And I say this a lot, but it's literally one of my favorite lines in the book. She says, "You look how I feel every day." And it's just such an amazing line, I feel
Hmm.
like.
Yeah, I agree. It really shows how they're both really just punishing themselves for being alive at this point, and they're both in the same place mentally.
Yeah. And like he just looks so defeated and vacant and empty. And it makes you realize how broken both of them are. And they've both been dealing with their traumas alone. And it's like almost serendipitous that they finally met this other person who understands what they've been going through, and
Hmm.
like somebody that they don't have to apologize to for being a mess.
Yeah.
It's it's so unbearably sad to read it and realize that they've been dealing with this whole thing by themselves alone.
Yeah. And hunt for like hundreds of years.
Yeah. It's it's so sad. So she takes care of him. She washes him. She like turns the hot water down so it's not scalding him anymore. She washes him and takes care of him and dresses him and tucks him into bed. And he sort of silently like asks her to stay, like makes a motion or like, a little movement to make her stay because he's so broken. He just wants company. So she gets into bed with him and strokes his hair until he falls asleep. So there's no like, it even specifically states that she briefly makes the, briefly notices that he's full on naked and like she notices the penis, like she does, but she says she has to like turn that part off, obviously, because obviously he's
It's
not
not
in
the
it.
time.
It's definitely not the time or the
Could be the
place.
place. Could be the place, but not the time.
Yeah, no, you're right. It could be the place, but you're right. It's definitely not the time. So, she strokes his hair in bed until he falls asleep. And it sort of seems really out of character for her so far. Like she's this tough, badass, like smart party person who, like she makes it no secret that she used to enjoy partying. And this is such a vulnerable maternal sort of side to her that we haven't seen yet. So it's another nuance to her character, I find.
Hmm.
Um, funny, we go from the really heavy and really dark to now all of a sudden this really funny part. When he wakes up, um, he says it smells like paradise, like home and eternity and where he was meant to be. So I'm wondering, like, does that sound like mates to you?
It does. Yeah. That sounds like a lot of, especially Sarah J. Maas's other books. It sounds like how she describes mates in her other books for sure.
Right. In her other book, she does say that smell is one of the first ways that they recognize each other, right? The
Hmm.
mating bond.
Yeah.
I guess the only thing I wonder is in this world, can angels have mates? Like
Yeah.
I can see the fae because they sort of seem like the same sort
Similar.
of
Yeah.
fae than in her other books, but can angels? And if
Yeah.
they can, is it the same sort of thing?
Yeah. It's a good question.
Um then I guess he opens his eyes and I guess he realizes that so his head originally was like sort of low on her shoulder for her, and she was like sitting up and he was more lying down. And I guess throughout the night, his head slipped further and further down her torso. So his face, when he opens his eyes, is very close to her vagine. So, like, is that what smells like paradise? Is it her vagine or is it just her in general? Like, I didn't realize vagines could smell like home and eternity all at
Ooh,
once.
yeah. I don't think they do, but that's another that's another point on the mate direction, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like that's something you would have to ask somebody who spends a lot of time
In a
down there.
vagina?
Yeah. Yes. Would you say they smell like home and or eternity or something like that? Like, I thought it was a cute, funny little moment. Like,
Yeah, for sure.
his head is right next to her vagine. Um, in the morning, I guess they meet in the kitchen and he kisses her cheek to thank her for taking care of him. And like, there's so much sexual tension in the morning. I guess he's feeling a little bit better, but like, you know how when they do that slow, like, kiss the cheek and then they linger there for a while and just like inhale their scent. We already know he like has a thing for her smell, from the neck nuzzling.
And from 5 seconds ago.
And from 5 seconds ago when he loved the smell of her vagine. um, we have sort of a tropey moment where he can smell her arousal. Like, I would find this a very inconvenient trait to have.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to read in public, for one.
You wouldn't be able to do much in public.
No,
Like,
it would
you,
be gross, gross. I'm just thinking about being at work now and like all the old men that I work with. It'd be awful.
yeah, and like, I literally work with teenagers.
Oh my God, that's even worse.
Right? Like, it would be so bad if that was a power that I possessed because I just feel like that's all I would smell.
Well, that
And
too, yeah. But if they
oh,
ever smelled it off you, you would just have to die.
yes,
If
that's
you were
true.
reading at work, you would just have to die. There's no
Yeah,
way out of
yeah,
it.
no, I feel like it's a very
Jump off the roof.
yeah, it's a very inconvenient thing to be able to smell from
But it's
people.
so, yeah, but it's so common in all the books where there's like supernatural beings that they can smell it.
Yeah, it's true. In our last book, same thing, Discovery of Witches.
Yes,
Matthew
true.
could smell when
Oh,
she was turned on. He
and
could.
she's a professor. What if she had any vampire students?
Yeah,
I guess it's less bad in college. Like everyone can just be like, oh, well,
we're adults. Yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, so he smells her arousal, which of course he can. And of course, she's sort of imagining them together and imagining them like in the kitchen. And she, again, of course, like presses her thighs together to stop the throbbing ache in her center, like very tropey at this moment.
Mhm.
Uh, and she's literally about to jump his bones. Uh, and all of a sudden, oh, breakfast burnt. The fire alarm is going off or something. And they have to stop whatever it is she was about to do and deal with the burnt food. And that ruins the moment. It's a lot of ruined moments in this book for these two.
Yes. And for the reader.
Legit, they have so many almost moments and
Mhm.
then gone.
Yeah.
It's very unfortunate. Um so I guess they both get ready, go about their day, get to the office or get to the gallery where Bryce is working and find out that Jessica bought a knock, which is some like sort of sea creature. So bought one and is now storing it in the secret library. So the secret library has this like tank on one end, and it's like this massive water tank, almost like a ginormous fish tank, but it takes up one entire wall, like top to bottom. So the knock is like a sea creature, and it's like a merman, but it doesn't really have the human half.
I think of Grindylows from Harry Potter.
Do you?
Yeah, I don't know
But
why. I don't think
there's
that's right, but that's like what's in my head.
no
Maybe a
see,
bit bigger.
yeah, I but like a lot like the size of a person.
Yeah.
And I just think of it like, yeah, like Creature from the Black Lagoon,
Mm,
like lizardy, but like with webbed fingers and like legs and arms, like the basic anatomy of a human, but literally like all scaly and green and gills. And anyway, apparently it's got real sharp teeth. Um, they like to eat humans. Great. And it's just swimming in the tank. They drop like a little tidbit here that they cannot have any part of their body out of the water. It's like a burn. It burns for them.
mm,
Like if they are out of the water, they are immediately dead.
yeah.
So breadcrumb. Lahaba complains. She thinks the knock is super creepy. It keeps sort of like staring at her, and fair point, man. Like you're small and you're made of fire. Obviously water is not your friend.
Hmm.
So, she complains, and like she's essentially locked in the room with this like thing that eats people. Yeah, it's not a great, you know, it's
Situation.
not
It's
a
not a
great
great
situation.
workplace.
No,
I think she
no.
should go to her manager about an unsafe working condition.
Yeah. Uh, so while they're there, Victoria the Wraith, member of the Triari, calls them and gives them the results of the test she was running on Danica's clothes and found evidence of a drug called synth on all the victims. So she not only tested Danica's clothes, but all the other victims' clothes too, and she found evidence of synth. That's what Bryce was offered in our very first episode by a drug dealer on the night of Danica's death when she was on her way to the White Raven to party. Someone offered her synth and she said no.
Because it was so expensive. It was like insane or something.
Yeah. Um, I guess they finish the workday, go back to her apartment. She wants to go out and investigate having this new piece of information, but Hunt sort of convinced her to stay home. She's supposed to have a video chat with her mother and father. Um, he gives us a little insight into his life. We learn that his mother cleaned houses for a living. And when he was old enough to have a job and was a soldier, he was sending her any spare money he had. Um, Apparently, some random person heard that he was sending her all this money, broke into her dwelling, her home, robbed the money because she hadn't spent any of it. She had saved it all, and then killed her. And that's how she died. He didn't know his father. Apparently, Hunt said one of the reasons why he joined the rebellion is because her bosses, so like she did a great job cleaning their houses, her bosses didn't care. Like they didn't do anything to celebrate her life. And nobody would give him leave, like would give him time off to grieve his loss. They didn't care about either of them. So that's sort of one of the reasons why he joined the rebellion, because his mother was not high born or high ranking. She was a cleaner, and it altered how he was treated and how she was treated. Um, so they sort of have a normal, what I call a normal experience of like cleaning the apartment together, which I find ridiculous. Like if I was video chatting my mom, I would make sure like the three walls surrounding me were clean in that area. I would not worry about cleaning my bathroom.
No.
How's how's my mom going to see that?
Yeah.
Unless I
And it,
bring her to the bathroom. Anyway, it would not be me, but she says that her mom is very particular about how the place looks, and says that apparently she can smell through the computer whether she used like bleach or not.
Insane.
Uh, they chat with Bryce's parents. Like, she does introduce Hunt to her parents, and they seem like lovely and normal and overbearing, loving parents,
Yep.
how they should be. But I feel like, so I think we've said before that her mom's name is Ember. uh we sort of get the tale of how her parents met, like Ember and Randall, the human dad, the stepdad. So when Ember was escaping the Autumn King, she actually hid in a temple for 3 years with Bryce. So she was pregnant, escaped, hid in a temple, had Bryce in the temple, and spent the first 3 years of Bryce's life there. And the Autumn King sort of finally tracks her down, and they finally have to go on the run again. And Randall was somebody who volunteered, someone just out of the military. He volunteered to protect them so that they could get to the sanctuary they were trying to get to. And I guess they fell in love and they were together ever since. After talking to her parents, they do decide to go and investigate. So they go to the meat market, of course, where you can get anything and everything. Uh, they're a bit obvious. Like, they just go around to all these vendors and be like, hey, you heard about synth? You heard about synth? You heard about synth? And all the vendors are like, no, because obviously even if they are running shady stuff, they're not going to tell the first person that asks them about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, who knows what that could do.
Also,
So,
everyone knows who Hunt is.
yeah.
He's a part of the
Yes.
33rd.
Yeah. Anyway, so the vendors tell her to check the river. So they send Therian, their mer friend that they met. They send Therian an otter, one of the cute little male otters. He breaks the news that he thinks that Danica was the one selling the synth to begin with.
Which is a wild accusation.
It is wild. So I guess Bryce wants, like, why are you saying that? How do you know that? But Therian says that he's not actually sure if she was selling it or buying it or what she was doing it with it. She could have been confiscating it. All he knows is that she was seen on a boat with a crate of it the day before she died. So Bryce is sort of, I'm not saying she's having like a midlife crisis, but she's sort of having a crisis of, she's wondering like why Danica didn't tell her about it.
Mm-hmm.
She's wondering why, Danica was doing all of these things, and if she even really knew Danica, because she's doing all these things and keeping secrets. She calls Fury about it because she's like, this is one of the people who deals in sort of shady dealings. She knows what's going on about shady things. So she's like, I'm going to call her. She hasn't talked to Fury in like 2 years. Fury has not answered the phone.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like a long shot in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
But she does finally answer the phone, and they have a chat about why Danica didn't tell Bryce about the synth. So I guess Fury says that it can give humans veneer level powers for a little bit. That's what the synth does. However, it's super addictive, so it can cause major dependence problems. Because, like, obviously, of course it would. If you are a human and you could be veneer for an hour, like if you could have those powers that you keep seeing around that you don't have,
Mm-hmm.
of course you would want them all the time if you could have them.
Yeah.
So they didn't tell her because it was so dangerous. And Fury sort of insinuates that Bryce was sort of on a, I guess I'll say like a destructive path. Like she was always drinking, always doing drugs, always partying. they didn't want her to know about synth because they sort of thought that it would just be the next thing for her to try. And it was
Yeah.
so dangerous. They didn't want her to have it. So, you know, um, they sort of think that Danica figured out who wanted the horn and the synth, so stole both so that whoever wanted it couldn't get it, which sounds a bit more in line for Danica's character, for what we know about Danica. She
Yeah.
wasn't selfish. She wasn't a thief. So if she's getting these things, it should be for a worthy cause.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess after this sort of revelation about Danica and the horn and the synthetic magic, the synth, in the next couple of days, she's having a cranky day because we figure out from Bryce's point of view that it's Danica's birthday. So she goes to a bakery and picks up, I guess, a pre order of Danica's favorite chocolate croissants and takes them to the Istros River and she sits right where she can see across the river towards the Bone City or the Bone Quarter. And she's upset because nobody else remembered that it was Danica's birthday. Juniper didn't remember. Fury didn't remember. Her mom didn't remember. She is feeling cranky because she said life goes on and people start to forget, but she can't forget. There's, I guess, such a deep hole full of grief and sadness. It's like she cannot move on. And in fairness, it seems so debilitating. I don't understand how she's still alive. Like, I don't understand how she has gotten up and gone through the motions every single day.
You just don't have a choice at that point, but it sounds exhausting.
Yeah. And this sort of sad moment of her, uh, you know, sitting as close as she can to Danica and ready to enjoy Danica's favorite treat is ruined because the new alpha of the new pack that took over for Danica's pack, Emily Ravenscroft, that we sort of had a run in the last episode, managed to get a hold of the croissants and wrote trash on them, like the word trash, wrote it on Danica's croissants to insult Bryce. And it's so frigging unnecessary. Like, that is literally just you being a terrible person.
Mm-hmm.
You are just doing it deliberately to hurt somebody. Who does that?
Yeah.
Anyway, Hunt is there with her and he's livid. He is pissed. And I guess he is so pissed, he flies all the way to Moonwood, where they are, and finds her laughing and giggling with her friends. Such mean girl behavior. Like, can you imagine like the girls and the friends all being like, can you imagine like, I was so mean. That is so funny. Oh my God, I'm such a good jokester. Like, it's, you just want to smack her upside the head.
Yeah, for sure.
But we get something almost as good. We get Hunt pinning her to the wall and like holding on to her by the throat and saying that she is not allowed to go near Bryce again, and essentially scares the shit out of all of them in the pack because they're all there. Ethan is also there and he sort of plays dumb, like, oh, I don't know what you mean. Like, what happened? And it's such a satisfying moment for like Emily to finally get put in her place. But I really want somebody to call Ethan out on all of his shit.
I don't think he knew that she was doing it. I think he's just being an idiot. Like, not, I think he's just being oblivious to how mean people are being to Bryce. think he just doesn't want to deal.
But he's also being equally mean. Like, he's being a terrible person to her
Oh,
as
he is
well.
too. Yeah. But I do think that he realizes that this is too far. I just think he didn't know about it until afterwards. But
I don't care. He is aggravating me to no end. I and I will say it until the end. He sort of tries to have a redeeming moment at the end of the book, and I'm not here for it.
yeah,
I don't think it's good enough. Like, he treats her like less than garbage, and nobody has like beaten him up. No one has called him out on it and told him he's a jackass, and I really need that.
fair.
I need it. Anyway, Hunt leaves after this, and I guess we've sort of had chats all throughout the book, and really especially this section, that Bryce should go to a medwitch and get her leg healed, the scar that she had left from Danica the night Danica was murdered. So she decides to go, and I guess she's told that the reason she's still in pain is because there's leftover venom from the crystallos demon in her scar, like in her scar tissue. So she decides to go and get it extracted because they want to use that venom to sort of run some tests.
Hmm. Yeah, so it's actually one specific meta witch whose name we still don't know who's trying to do all these tests, basically. And I don't think we get a name here either for her,
No,
but
it's the one that Ruhn like
yes,
thinks
has
is pretty.
chemistry.
Yeah.
So Bryce goes to the clinic and Hunt goes with her because obviously she's struggling to go on her own, whether it's fear of this whole thing happening, also the fact that she wants to be punished because she's still alive. It's just she can't go alone, so Hunt goes with her. While they're there, Hunt kind of apologizes. They kind of have a little moment about how he is the one that stapled her leg and basically gave her the scar. And she's like, she doesn't care about the scar. She's not as material as everyone thinks she is, which is another nice moment and one of the things where you're like, Hunt, you need to like stop thinking everything you keep thinking. But the meta witch basically tells her that she doesn't understand how Bryce is still walking. Removing this venom is going to be super painful because it's basically holed its way into her body. It's like parasitic now and it wants to stay in there.
Ew.
So it's
It's
going to hurt.
yeah.
It's
But
going to
like,
hurt a lot.
but fair point, because remember, like we talked about, I think the first episode we did for this book,
Mm-hmm.
uh, she's like forcing herself not to limp. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't see how that's possible. I don't see how you can let yourself not limp.
Yeah. We decided it was something fey because it doesn't make sense for humans.
It does not. And she's half human. So I
Yeah.
don't.
So the meta witch like starts the procedure basically to remove it, and Hunt helps her through it because she doesn't take any anesthesia or anything, and she goes through the pain because she wants to feel all of the pain, I guess. But Hunt kind of like helps her through it. He calls her sweetheart in a cute way instead of a condescending way, and that's kind of like a cute moment that they have. The meta witch eventually gets the venom out, and basically she's able to like put it in a test tube with some synth, and then using her magic to stabilize it, she can get rid of the synth. So they know somehow they can use the venom to counteract synth, but she's still using so much of her magic to do it. So that's obviously not feasible in the real world. You don't have an antidote based on that. So,
Yeah. So I guess the issue is that the synth is so dangerous that they want some form of way to counteract the effects
mhm.
once it's consumed. So that's what they're sort of trying to do, is they think, well, since Chrysalis venom neutralizes magic. Maybe we can get it to neutralize synth. So
Yeah.
they're just trying to figure out how to do that.
Yeah. So it'll basically be an antidote for like taking the drug of synth.
Yeah.
So Micah calls Hunt and Bryce in for a meeting later that day. When they get there, Sabine and Emily are there. And Sabine is kind of the reason that this meeting was called. She says, a slave assaulted a free citizen, and therefore the slave should automatically forfeit their life, which obviously seems insane. And everyone in the room is kind of like, what the hell, including Emily, even though she's obviously a huge bitch anyway, but she even is like, wait a second, what is happening? So it's because Hunt basically threatened Emily. But Micah's like, I'm not just gonna kill him. He's got a job. He's doing shit for me. I'm not gonna kill him right here just because he threatened somebody. But they do punish him with what's called the living death, which
Eugh.
is cutting off an angel's wings,
Eugh.
which just sounds horrifying. They do grow back, but it obviously takes time. She says that she went to the Underking. She's talking to Bryce now, and she says that she went to the Underking trying to see her daughter in the afterlife. And Danica wouldn't see her because she was ashamed of how she died. The Underking also told Sabine that Bryce made a bargain with him after Danica died and traded her spot in the Bone Quarter to ensure Danica would make it. And that makes Danica ashamed, basically, of getting there because maybe she didn't actually earn the spot. And Sabine says that Danica should have just tipped over instead. Micah kind of just kicks everybody out at that point. And Emily, as she's leaving, apologizes. And I do believe she's sorry, but it's also like, it's too late. You were a bitch about way too many things. You can't just apologize here and
Like, she is literally just one of those typical mean girl bitches that wants to bully somebody else because she like took her man or whatever.
yeah.
That's literally her like reason for living. And then because of what she did, she just saw somebody get their wings cut off. So yeah, I think she's a bit shocked, but like still, I do not forgive her.
No, for
She
sure.
is a straight up bitch.
Yeah. And Sabine is like having this whole conversation with Bryce while Hunt is like passed out on the floor with no wings anymore. It's just like, doesn't seem like this is the time. Like,
Yeah.
what?
Again,
What are you thinking?
time and place, people. Like I feel like we constantly have to say to them this episode, like time and place.
Yeah.
I feel like I do sort of, not that I get Sabine here. I don't at all. I still think she's a terrible person. But I sort of understand some of her anger towards Bryce in this instance.
About this
Because,
one Under King situation, you mean?
yes,
Yeah.
because again, like we all know that werewolves are creatures of loyalty and honor. Like that is
Mm-hmm.
sort of their creed. They really revere loyalty and they really revere honor. So for in Sabine's mind, if her daughter didn't deserve a spot in the Bone Quarter and she has one anyway, like that is the height of dishonor. So while I get that for Bryce, it was I want to do the right thing for my friend and she deserves to have an afterlife. But in Sabine's mind, no, you need to earn your place. And if she
Mm-hmm.
didn't earn her place and has it anyway, then that's not cool. So, like,
Yeah.
I can see why she would be mad about this one thing, but
Yeah.
not be the crazy bitch she is for everything else.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like, I don't, I understand that Bryce obviously was like so full of grief, but like, what makes you so sure that you have a spot there that you can trade away to begin with?
Yeah.
B, everything we've heard about her friend has been about how selfless and like caring and amazing she is. Why wouldn't she have a place?
I
Assuming that it's the same as like heaven hell type thing. That's what they're making it seem like. Like if you're good, you go there.
yeah.
Just
But also too, like saying that the way she died was like dishonorable. And I don't understand that because as far as we know, she was ripped apart by a crystallos demon. Like how is that not like that's not something that she could help. You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like if a demon overpowered her and tore her to shreds.
And it's not even just her, it's her, it's the entire pack. It's not
Yeah.
like, yeah.
So anyway.
So yeah, Bryce kind of thinks to herself that uh, she didn't think that Danica wouldn't make it into the bone corner. She just didn't want to chance it since Danica had always talked about being there, which isn't really Bryce's place. Like, yes, Danica obviously wanted to be there and she wanted to be with her heroes and a part of the city that she loved, but she probably wanted to earn it and know if she earned it. So I can see her spirit, ghost, whatever lives in the bone core, her soul. I can see her actually being upset that Bryce did that because now she doesn't even know if she did deserve to be there and she'll never know
Yeah.
as a spirit, soul, ghost thing.
Yeah.
So the next scene is basically Hunt is passed out in Bryce's bed and she's stroking his hair. He's obviously not doing well. His wings were just chopped the fuck off.
Yeah.
So she sends a message to Ethan actually saying that Emily is a piece of shit and that she's going to kill Sabine basically next time she sees her. He says he had nothing to do with it. And like I said before, I kind of I believe him, but he's also still being a piece of shit and not doing much to help her in any way. That it's like, if you were such a good friend to her before, like your standing by is just as bad as their bullying.
Yeah. And like just for the record, she said she's gonna kill Sabine because of what she's the one who brought the whole Hunt threatening Emily to Micah.
Mm-hmm.
That was all Sabine. So
Yeah.
like she's gonna kill Sabine just for making Hunt lose his wings.
Yeah. It's kind of another mate ish thing.
Yes, like overprotectiveness.
Yeah. Now that I'm thinking it through.
Yeah.
But yeah. Bryce asks Ruhn to look after Hunt, which again kind of shows how she is relying on Ruhn a bit more for some things, and like he's enjoying it too, but you can tell that there might be some salvation in their relation. There might be some fixing it.
Yeah.
She has to go to work because Jessica is Jessica, and work doesn't wait for anybody. While she's in the gallery, Bryce ends up hacking into Redner Industries website using Danica's username. And the password is through love, all is possible, which you'd think would just be like the first thing she tried, but it wasn't.
So Redner Industries was this place where Danica used to do her she used to do security work there.
Yeah. They're the reason that they have cell phones and technology, and they're like very like Micah invests in them and they like are technology forward. We don't really get into the specifics, but it's probably like an Apple, Google. So Bryce has gotten into the Redner Industries website, and Danica, I guess, has folders under her profile. So Bryce kind of looks through them and finds like some sneaky ones with her name on it. It's like some like party invites or something, and then Bryce. And it reminds her of her secret folder that has her resume in it. So she opens it and she finds a photo of the leather jacket. And then she's like, this must be a clue. So she grabs the jacket, and in one of the letters there's a flash drive. So she cuts it open and takes the flash drive out.
Which like how would you not notice a flash drive in your coat after 2
banging
years?
against your back.
Yeah.
Like you think you'd, or if you lean back wearing the coat in a chair, like wouldn't you feel that?
You would think.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Plot hole. So she obviously checks out the flash drive. There's 3 videos on it, and they're videos of synth trials. Um, so they gave synth to basically what looked like a small human girl, and she ripped a veneer to shreds, to pulp, if you will. Um,
Ooh, dun dun dun.
what? And then she kills herself as well and rips herself to pulp because obviously she is probably disgusted with herself after, or she just doesn't want to be where she is anymore and just wants to die. We don't know
Oh,
her reasoning.
that's not. So what I took from it, the 3 videos. So like the first video is her being on the synth and then sending one veneer into the room, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
the second video is her being on the synth and they send even more like veneer into the room. So
Mm-hmm.
she's like building up and up. The last video, again, the same thing. They send even more veneer in. She just tears them all apart. And I took it as she was just so crazy hopped up on synth that she tore herself apart.
Mm.
I didn't take it as like I didn't take it as a conscious decision to tear herself apart.
Oh, okay. They so Bryce shows these videos to Hunt, and they realize that whoever killed Danica in the pack was likely on synth based on the videos and how the victims ended up and how Bryce found Danica in the pack. That they were pulp and they were likely killed the same way because their bodies looked the same.
Yeah, because remember too that Therian, the Mer, found bodies that looked to be from the Crystallos demon, and they were not pulpy at all.
Yeah. So it had seemed a little odd anyway, but now it's even like, oh, well, this is obviously a way that they could have been killed. So they kind of realize that maybe the Crystallos demon could have been summoned to use as an antidote, like the Medowitch was trying to do. Or they could just be drawn there, and it may have nothing to do with the horn. So we really don't. This is really kind of thrown a wrench into things. We don't really know what's going on anymore because this drug has obviously turned all these investigations upside down. Um, Hunt tries to stop her from looking too far into synth again, because he already did a bit earlier when she wanted to go investigate, and he was like, no, you should call your mom. He says that Michael will kill him, and it's really the only thing that kind of stops her. He kind of tells her that he wants an after with her. So after all, this investigation is over, he wants to be able to spend the rest of his time with her, and he thinks that they have a future together.
So I guess he's trying to sort of tell her or trying to imply that he thinks the whole thing with the synth is unrelated. Like he's saying, oh, well, yeah, sure, the synth is interesting, but it doesn't really have to do with Danica's death. Like, let's
Mm-hmm.
focus on that instead. Like, he
Yeah,
doesn't think they're linked at all.
yeah. And it's looking back after a few chapters later, like when he's saying it, it's kind of cute, and you're like, oh, he wants to be with her, but it's kind of manipulating. Um, but I guess she kind of buys it, and she's really happy. So they finally kiss for reals.
Woo!
So she tells him that she wants all of it. And we all imagine it's going to be a fun, sexy time next, as the reader, obviously. And for a bit, it is. Bryce gets hers, but Hunt's wings were literally just cut off. So I think it's been maybe a full 24 hours since that. So he's not doing so hot by the end of it because she's basically like grinding into his hand, which is pushing him against the couch. And then he's not moaning in pleasure, he's groaning in pain. And he starts bleeding profusely during their good makeout sesh. She gets extremely embarrassed.
And like when we say like they were going at it.
Hmm.
Like it was actually very satisfying. Like they were finally getting to it. Like the very first line in this whole thing is the moment Hunt's lips met her own, Bryce erupted. Like they were not going like sweet and tender and oh, it's our
Mm-mm.
first time. Like they were going for it. And like they were like being rough with each other. He was like ripping her clothes off. She was like yanking on his pants, straddling him, grinding on him. He was like biting her boobs. Like it was like he was enjoying it at at first.
Yes. And it's obviously it's in Bryce's point of view, so she didn't realize when it turned. So obviously we as the reader don't know exactly when it turned either. But I just kind of feel bad for her cuz like this is Hunt's fault. Like he should have really said something before he got to this point of bleeding all over the couch.
Yeah.
He does obviously want to have sex with her,
Oh
but
yeah. He
she calls him meta witch instead.
like, and I quote, he says, I am going to fuck you until you can't remember your God's damned name. So, like, he is in it for the most
Yeah.
part. So, like, she orgasms and every nerve in her body exploded into glorious starlight. So, remember the last episode we talked about him seeing stars?
Mhm.
Well, she sees starlight. And it's really only that, like, little tiny bit where she's like, he's fingering her and she comes, that's when he's in pain.
Yeah.
But like all the up to this, he's like, I have plans for this beautiful ass. Like he's saying, come for me. Like he's
Mhm.
into it until like the last 30 seconds.
It's true.
And then he sort of wants to continue too.
Yeah, which is like such a pillar of him as a person. Not
Yeah.
he's not a person, but him as a male. It's like he doesn't care about his own pain. He just wants this basically. So
Yeah.
yeah, he 100% just wants to have sex, but she's like, "No, we're going to get a meta witch cuz you are bleeding heavily." So a meta witch does come and she tells him that he's not cleared for sex until his wings grow back completely. So that is a bummer.
And we're all like, ugh.
We're like 3/4 of the way through this book, and you're telling me that they're not gonna have sex again until his wings grow back? Like, how long does that take? We don't know. We don't have wings.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate.
Yeah. So Hunt kind of goes to bed because he's in pain and his wings were chopped off and he needs some rest.
Yeah.
So Bryce sneaks out to go look at her and Danica's old apartment for clues. She gets there and it is on fire. So she's like, someone's clearly monitoring her emails since she asked the landlord if she could come look at it, I guess. And she emailed him and he responded. So somebody's clearly monitoring her emails and worked extremely fast. So I guess she's just standing outside of the apartment, like, what the fuck? And Therian kind of finds her because they had gone to him and asked about any synth deals that he'd seen because she was told to go look at the river. So Therian finds her and he brings her out to see a synth deal that is like currently happening. They have to go right now. She can't go get anyone to help. They're on their way. They kind of get close enough on a wave skimmer, and the Viper Queen is on the boat. And it looks like she's the one selling it, which is a interesting but
It's
unsurprising
It's more of a,
fact.
of course she is. Like
Yeah,
she's the one that can procure anything and everything for anybody as long as you have the money. So
exactly. So it's like, ah, yes. But then the buyer turns around, pulls their hood down, and is like in the spotlight for a second. And Bryce is like, Jesus fucking Christ, it's Hunt.
dun dun
So,
dun.
right? Um,
This
Hunt,
was, I will say, one of the biggest plot twists I think I've ever encountered in a book like this. Like our main sort of protagonist, like male protagonist, turns
Hmm.
out to be like, well, I guess it is pretty typical. He has an ulterior motive to something.
Yeah, but he's like a bad guy, really,
Yeah.
at this moment. We're like,
Yeah.
did he kill Danica? Like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah. And it's just like, you would have never thought. Like, I was not expecting this at all.
No. And I don't know. I kind of don't know how I feel about it. I don't know. It just makes me not trust any of the characters when I'm reading this book now.
Yeah.
Really. I'm like, well, they're
Yeah.
so yeah, Hunt is the buyer and Vic is there, the Wraith, Victoria, and Justinian is there, who is another rebel turned slave angel.
In the 33rd.
Yes, in the 33rd. So Bryce basically like leaps onto the boat when sees Hunt because she is heartbroken. She's
Yeah. Well, she literally thought that she left him like sick and poorly in bed with no wings after she just like grinded on him so much she saw starlight as she orgasmed. And now all of a sudden, here he is.
yeah, after also trying to stop her from investigating synth in general, he's there buying it. It's kind of wild. So the Viper Queen set them up though, and Micah basically immediately shows up after Bryce jumps on the boat. So Hunt, Justinian, and Vic were apparently hoping to use synth to be power enough to break their halos. Um, Hunt has known about Sith for days and has been trying to find a way to buy it.
Can I just say I find that really hard because like he's been with her almost the entire time. How is he like how is he finding time to do this without her?
Yeah. So I guess he murdered some people for Micah and they told him about it. But like how did he figure out how to buy it? Does he just
Yeah,
not sleep, I guess? Like
maybe.
one of those. Um so they kind of they do a bit of a breakdown about everything that happened with Danica now because somehow magically everybody on the boat knows what happened 2 years ago. But for me, I'm like, there's so much happening and they like make so many claims that it's just like I feel like there's so many leaps in this section. But well, just to get right into them, Danica apparently sold the original amount of synth that was on the streets 2 years ago. So she stole it from Redner Industries, and I guess that's why she was on the boat the day before she was murdered. And she sold that amount, and it didn't last long, but it hasn't been on the streets anymore until somebody, I guess, figured out how to replicate it, and now they're selling it again. Danica was apparently also addicted to it, though. Bryce had no idea, and you'd think that Bryce would know her friend well enough to know.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're just going to bypass that as well. They also say that Danica must have killed the two CCU students. So there was two students that were nearby where she was posted the night that the horn was stolen. And they're saying that she must have killed them after they saw her stealing the horn. And then Hunt specifically himself says that he believes that Danica took too much synth the night of her death, basically, and accidentally murdered her entire pack and herself. You know, all those accidental murders that happen.
Yeah.
Micah agrees with this, but Bryce obviously can't wrap her head around it. And I'm on Bryce's side here. I'm like, after everything we've seen about Danica through Bryce's eyes, it just seems hard to imagine that this is what happened.
And Bryce is sort of, I find, almost too accepting at this point. Like,
Yeah.
she,
I think
like,
she's in shock.
she's in shock and just sort of accepts it as fact and is like,
Mm-hmm.
oh. And it does sort of tie up all the loose ends very nicely.
Yeah. No, it does, but it's just like, it's hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
And how did these people just jump to all of these same conclusions? It's just like, when I was reading it, I almost felt like I was just missing something. They also say that Danica just stole the horn as a joke, and the crystallos demon is apparently just a side effect of large doses of synth. So, synth has summoning salt in it, and it also has the unholy number of the crystallos demon. So, the drug is on the streets, people are using it, and then they're accidentally summoning this exact demon. And that's basically how the guard and the acolyte were murdered.
Like, yeah,
Was
this time around.
yeah,
And Max Tertian.
yes, him too. So Fury magically shows up at this boat, which is like another wild thing, but I really do hope we get kind of like a side story about her because I need more information.
Yes.
But Bryce is obviously losing it that Hunt knew and didn't tell her, that she's learning all these things about Danica that don't make sense with what she knows about her. And
And he already deduced all of these things.
and
And
just didn't
like,
tell her.
yeah. I'd be pissed too.
Definitely. He led her around in circles and she was like, you should have just talked to her, really, but did not. Hunt tells Bryce basically that he wanted to back out of this deal after he saw the trial footage, but he couldn't stop Vic and Justinian, which I think is a super shitty thing to say in front of Micah. Like, Micah's just standing there like, you guys are all treasonous, but Hunt's like, I didn't want to do it anymore. They forced me. It's like, I know he's trying to tell Bryce that he likes her and stuff, but I'm like, this is not, maybe not the time.
Yeah, it's sort of like he's throwing them under the bus.
100%. Yeah, he says he just wants to be with her and doesn't care about rebelling anymore, which is kind of shitty too. Like, he had a point with the rebellion. They're still slaves. It's not like just because he's happy and in like with somebody, now that he's found somebody he maybe sees a future with, like, he's still a slave.
Yeah.
Life is no better for humans.
Yeah.
Bryce whips a pearl at his head that he had bought her, and it cuts his head, which I just thought was kind of funny in that moment. But
how does a pearl cut your head?
I know, like, did she?
Like,
how hard
pearls?
Did she go that?
Pearls are round.
Yeah,
they're not sharp.
No,
unless this
like,
is a really cheap pearl.
I just imagine it like hitting him in the temple like a bullet, but clearly not hard enough.
She must have really whipped it at his head then.
Yeah, basically. Fury at this point, like, kind of protects Bryce a bit. Like, she goes over and she basically threatens the governor to leave Bryce alone, which she clearly has some balls on her to do that, to think that she can threaten a governor and get away with it.
But also, like, she must have a good deal of clout, like, for the fact that she can do that and not get repercussions. Like, she can do that. He's not going to say anything to her. So, like, who the hell is she?
Exactly.
Like, she must be someone really, like, she must be a really good assassin, spy, whatever she does for a living. The fact that she can do that and get away with it, who is she?
Yeah, exactly. There's more to that story.
Yeah.
Hunt says that he was trying to protect Bryce since her heart was already broken. And it's like, that's the dumbest answer ever.
No, lame.
Thank you, next. Like,
yes,
move
like,
along.
I don't want you to lie. Don't lie. That's silly.
So Fury kind of brings Bryce back to Bryce's apartment. And on the way, I guess Fury had called Ruhn, and he meets Bryce at her apartment. And he kind of like comforts her and he holds her while she sobs, and like she's still kind of trying to process everything. And Bryce kind of comes to the conclusion that Hunt must have burnt down the apartment building because he didn't want her to figure it out, which I don't know what his end game was, because like people would have figured it out eventually. Like, I don't know what he was trying to really save her from. It would have come out down the road. Like,
yeah.
Anyway.
Well, like, if the whole reason they wanted the synth was to break their halos, obviously breaking their halos, people would notice.
What? Yeah.
I'm like, what was he planning on doing once his halo was broken? Is he just gonna like continue living with Bryce and be like, Micah, you can't see me, I'm not here? Like,
That's why his
what?
hair is long. He's going to wear
What?
his ball cap all the time.
I just don't know what, like, yeah, I agree. I don't know what the plan of attack was after, like, the immediate sort of breaking our halos. What was the goal then? What were they going to do?
Yeah. So I guess Bryce and Ruhn are in her apartment, and Fury comes back and kind of talks to Ruhn because Bryce is kind of still like in her head processing and not responsive. So Fury kind of tells Ruhn that Justinian was crucified and is currently bleeding in the lobby of the Comitium. So he's basically just in the lobby dying to show what'll happen if you rebel.
Eesh.
And Vic, the Wraiths, her essence is in a box and it's going to be thrown into the ocean.
So, like, she's a wraith, so I think her whole deal is she can switch from body to body, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's her whole thing. And apparently they took her soul, I guess,
Yeah.
and put it in a locked box and put it in the bottom of the at the like deepest part of the ocean. So she's just gonna hang out there, conscious, with no body, in the dark, in the bottom of the ocean by herself for eternity.
Yeah. Which
Because
is
I
a
guess
lot.
because she doesn't have a body, so I'm assuming she can't die.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, eeh, it seems
Way
harsh.
worse. Yeah.
I mean, if I had to choose, I wouldn't choose either. Like, if it came down to it, I wouldn't be happy with either choice. You could either be crucified, or I could take your soul, put it in a box, and put in the bottom of the ocean for you to live forever and ever by yourself. Like, neither option seemed great.
No, no. I'd much rather Hunt's option, which is at the moment he's in a holding cell awaiting his fate.
I will say, Micah was very quick to decide what was going to happen to the rebels. Like, there was no trial or anything like that. It was just like, it's like, it just seems weird that he had these punishments in his back pocket.
Yeah, it's another mark in the maybe he's really becoming his true self instead of like the
Yeah.
fair, just person we thought he was in the beginning of the book.
Like, who thinks to crucify somebody in the lobby of a building? Like, how do you think of that? He must have like sort of had that already as an option in his brain.
Definitely.
Anyway,
So we jump to Hunt's point of view very briefly, and he's in a holding cell and he's just watching video of Vic and Justinian's punishment.
like, can I just say, what sort of prison cell, like holding cell, has a TV?
This is the future.
I guess
Yeah. I know. It seems
it's
a bit much, but I guess
it's a fancy prison cell.
yeah, I guess if the point is to like show all the shit that's going down, maybe it makes sense, or show what you're missing out on. Not in his case, but kind of.
Yeah.
So Isaiah comes to talk to Hunt, and he asks why Hunt and Vic and Justinian did this, and it's like, Isaiah, you're a slave too. Like, you know why? I know, like, Isaiah's like, it clearly wasn't gonna work. Like, you shouldn't have done this. Thank you for your retrospective opinion, but they didn't know it necessarily wouldn't have worked. I don't know. I just thought that was a bit. But then, too, there's cameras everywhere, so it does make sense that he would ask.
I feel like Isaiah's sort of this like ideal character. Like, yes, he rebelled. Yes, he's a slave, but he's worked really hard and like he doesn't act like a slave. He's not really treated like one as far as we've seen. Like, it said even earlier in the book that it was sort of, even though he's a slave, he's still the commander of the 33rd. Like, he was still sort of respected.
Yeah.
And it even said that Micah was going to maybe petition Isaiah for his freedom.
Yeah.
So like I feel like for him it wasn't as hopeless. So
Well,
he didn't understand the hopelessness aspect of it. Like, why would you do this? Like, you had a deal. But like, Isaiah was so close to being out of it and wasn't really treated like a slave that
yeah,
much that maybe he had a skewed perspective.
maybe. Or maybe he's just playing it up for the cameras. Like, it's obviously hard for us to know without getting in his head too, but it just, I was just like, this is a dumb question. You know why he's doing this. Like, he has a completely different job in this 33rd than you do, and it's killing him. So Hunt basically says that, and you gotta wonder if this is being taped because the plan was basically to get the synth, remove their halos, and murder Micah and I guess all the other archangels slash important people at the summit, and then go to Pangera to assist. Um, isn't really a great plan. I also
No.
wouldn't say it out loud in a building where Micah lives, owns everything,
Yeah.
has cameras. It just seems. I was really
Yeah.
surprised that he actually said that. I know that we needed to hear it kind of as the reader, but I was like, it seems dumb.
Yeah.
But he also says, um, sorry, Isaiah says that they all know that Hunt tried to stop the deal. Micah knows that too because of texts that I guess Hunt had been sending to Vic and Justinian. And Micah also knows that Bryce had nothing to do with it. So he's not going to go after Bryce, which is good for Hunt to hear because he's kind of worried about that. We pop back over to Bryce's point of view, and she's at work, and they still have no idea kind of what's going to happen to Hunt. And but at this point, we hear that Justinian is dead. So I guess that has come out in the news because she knows that. The Meta Witch sent her a vial of antidote from the venom in her leg, which is nice of her. And she puts
Breadcrumb.
that, yeah, she puts that in the safe, which, I completely forgot about. So it's a breadcrumb that I didn't really pick up on the first time around. So the Autumn King shows up, and it's kind of the first interaction I think that we get with Bryce and her biological father in this book. Because obviously earlier in these chapters, he wouldn't let her come in, or the guards wouldn't let her come in, so she couldn't have the interaction that we wanted. So the Autumn King says that the governor's not going to harm her since she wasn't involved, and he, I guess, put a word in to say, she's part of this house, don't touch her. He also tells her that he loved her mother, and he's sorry for what happened, and he almost made Ember his queen, which is all news to Bryce. Like, she didn't realize this at all. She kind of thought that he was heartless, and
I
it's
mean,
really not a good time to be telling her this because she's already processing so much. She's like, I don't
yeah.
even care anymore.
I will say that, like, I don't know if this is meant as like a humanizing moment for him or if it's meant to gain sympathy. I do not sympathize with him at all. Like, yes, he comes in and has this nice moment and says, like, I did love your mother. I just wanted what was best. Like, I would have made her my queen. He's like sort of insinuating, look, see, I'm not bad because I was going to make a human my queen. Like, ooh, look at me. And
Yeah.
it's like, it's not having the intended effect.
Yeah. No, I agree. He also says that Bryce is more like him than she realizes, and that is not a good thing. You're like, thanks, I guess. Thanks for showing up, Dad. This was all a lot of fun.
I mean,
Um,
I can see it because, like, they're both stubborn,
mhm.
like, they're both outspoken, they're both, I can see the similarities.
Yeah, but it's just, I'm like, seems like a weird time to drop all this stuff. I
Oh,
don't know.
100%. Time and
I don't.
place.
So now we pop right back to Hunt's point of view again. And Sandriel goes to see Hunt. And again, he has a screen in his cell. So she has his phone and she starts playing like a slideshow of his photos on the screen behind him to kind of taunt him. And it kind of goes through like the first photo I think that Bryce took was a selfie of herself at the store when they got her new phone. And then as time went on, I guess they've kind of had a thing where they just are taking pictures of each other and taking selfies, whatever. So he's kind of looking at the pictures and he can kind of see the light in both his eyes and Bryce's eyes kind of get brighter as their time together went on.
Yeah, they were healing each other.
Yeah. And it's kind of like a sweet realization, but also it's a bit late because we now figure out that Sandriel owns Hunt again. And that is devastating, obviously, because she is not good.
Yeah, so I guess that was the punishment that Micah decided he deserved for even thinking about rebelling, is
Yeah.
selling
Well,
him back to Sandriel.
it's kind of like
And that's like almost the
not,
worst thing you could do.
it is for Hunt, but it's also like he said he was going to sell Hunt back to Sandriel for attacking Amelie like a few chapters ago. And the only reason that Hunt actually backed out of this is because he realized that the drug was so crazy. It's not like he backed out because he realized, like, I was wrong. Rebelling is bad. Like, Micah could really have done a lot worse than he did. But
Yeah.
so Bryce obviously has no idea that any of that is happening. And she goes to see Ruhn to thank him. And they kind of decide that they want to try to have a relationship again. Um, like a
A
sister
brother, yeah, a
brother
brother sister.
relationship.
A brother sister one people. We're not.
Bryce is still kind of healing, which is nice to see. Even though Hunt is not in her life right now, she's still going through the motions of like still she's not reversing too far into the way she was before she met him.
Right.
So Bryce gets home and Fury is on her couch. Fury has some news. She makes Bryce promise she won't do anything stupid. Fury tells Bryce that Hunt is being given to Sandriel. So, like, I don't even think Sandriel had to pay for him. Micah was just like, this is the worst thing I could do. Have him. Bryce kind of brings up the last 2 years between herself and Fury, which,
Rightfully so.
yeah, we kind of needed this conversation. So Fury kind of says that she was mad at herself for giving Bryce the drugs the night that Danica died. Like, obviously, that night, Bryce had brought some of her own drugs, but Fury also came with different drugs. So she is mad about that situation because Bryce almost died. And part of it was because she was on so many drugs when she was trying to get home. And then when she was running after a demon, like, probably not the best time to be high as a kite.
I mean, to each their own.
Well, it's probably better than running after a demon sober and then being scared shitless. So
That's true.
I don't know. So basically, was just afraid that she was going to lose Bryce that night too, and she feels kind of responsible for it. And Bryce kind of goes back and is like, "But you and Juniper have still like spoken, and that's kind of bullshit. Like, I know we were all friends. It's shitty that you just decided to keep her and kind of dump me." And Fury kind of says that they have a special relationship, and it takes Bryce a second, but she kind of realizes that Fury and Juniper are actually together and they are in love.
Are they, but like at this point, are they together or do they just have like feelings for each other? Because I didn't get that they were actually together. I thought that they just like were into each other but hadn't really like started a relationship.
I thought that they were together, especially because she then says that Fury says that Juniper's helping her work through her shit. So, like, I guess it could be the beginning, and like, this is kind of like, I don't know. Fury definitely knows that she's in love with Juniper at this point. Whether there's a full blown relationship happening, I guess we don't 100% know. But also, how would we know? Bryce hasn't spoken to Fury in years, basically. Fury almost kind of apologizes, but doesn't really, because that's not really in her nature. And this section kind of just ends with Bryce saying in her head, and I quote, "I promised Fury I wouldn't do anything stupid. I didn't say I wouldn't do anything smart." So next week, I'm expecting a very smart plan.
I'm expecting something the opposite of that.
Well, Bryce lied to me, and that makes me upset.
Because like whenever you think you have a smart plan, it's not.
I know.
So next week we'll find out what this super smart plan is belonging to Bryce. That wraps it up for this week. Next week will be the rest of our book. We're going to go right to the end, chapter 71 to 98. If you want to get in touch with us and share your thoughts on anything you heard in our episodes, or if you have any book suggestions, you can email us at coffeeandcoread@gmail.com. And be sure to check us out on Twitter and Instagram at Coffee and Co-Read.
And if you're enjoying our little chats, don't forget to follow, rate, and review wherever you find our content. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll see you on the next page.